Greetings. I'm Josh Tyson, co-author of the first best-selling book about conversational AI, Age of Invisible Machines. The book explores the learnings of 20-year conversational AI veteran and OneReach AI CEO, Robb Wilson. Each week, Robb and I bring in a guest to continue the conversation we started in the pages of our book. This week, on the Invisible Machines podcast, we're talking about expectations leaders and doers should have as their companies adopt generative AI, how to create a sophisticated AI assistant in the financial sector, the ways that people across an organization are integral to the process, why the quality of your unstructured data matters so much, why being a creative problem solver might be the most important skill to have right now, and how to get leadership signed on for the long haul. This week's guest, Jeff McMillan, is the Chief Analytics and Data Officer at Morgan Stanley. His team worked closely with OpenAI to create an AI assistant that uses GPT-4. Trained on more than 100,000 of the investment bank's internal documents, Morgan Stanley Assistant is making their advisors smarter. Bringing more than 20 years of experience working with AI to the project, Jeff was able to help give Morgan Stanley a massive competitive edge. It's also worth noting that this conversation was recorded a few days before Sam Altman's ouster from OpenAI. With that, let's get into this fascinating and incredibly practical conversation with Jeff McMillan. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We are really excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Robb, pleasure as always seeing you here in our Riverside studio.
Mm-hmm.
What we've noticed is that one of the challenges that businesses cross industries are facing with generative AI is creating alignment with their brand. These projects are incredibly complex, and I think with the maturity of AI, AI can do so much more, but there's so much more opportunity for things to go wrong. So with the project you worked on Morgan Stanley, we love just kind of hearing about minutia too. So if you could kind of tell us how that came about, and I know you have a lot of experience working in AI, and I'm wondering if some of your past experiences really informed some of the decision-making that went into what you accomplished in Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, sure. I think the story goes back almost 2 years. I have a team solely focused on innovation, and the pace of technological disruption, it just seems to only increase. And just to give you a sense of the effort, I mean, we probably talked to 400 companies, on the West Coast, East Coast, overseas, and these are all emerging fintech players. And of those 400, we probably did pilots with 20, and we'll probably do business with 4 or 5. And it just gives you a sense of the funnel that you have to go, because so many of these things candidly don't do what they say they're going to do. They do something that you don't need them to do. There's a lot of hype on this, so you have to do a lot of due diligence. But one of the companies that we met through somebody who knew somebody was this little company based in Silicon Valley called OpenAI. And there we were with Sam Altman and his leadership team, and my boss, Andy Saperstein, who's the co-president here. And we had our GPT moment, right? We had it long before I think most people. We actually took one of my boss's speeches, and the joke was we started asking questions in real time, and the answers that the OpenAI was giving were better than his answer. He would actually agree with that. So we walked away from that saying, geez, and let me be clear, Morgan Stanley is never bleeding edge. Right. I mean, there's lots of challenges, and we could talk about that. But we walked away thinking, hey, let's see what we can do with this, because this is really disruptive. And we essentially had 3 criteria. One is we want to do something that financial advisors would, unambiguously say, this is awesome. 2, we wanted to do something that we thought was, in the lane of OpenAI, and candidly, it ended up being a lot harder than we had anticipated. And then 3, we wanted to avoid client data, client information, because in a regulated environment that creates lots of concerns. So we wound up with a use case to essentially take all the knowledge of Morgan Stanley, every research report, procedure, quick reference card, product information. I mean, life on getting married, getting divorced, prenuptial agreements. I mean, you name it. And by the way, it's all there. But the normal way in which we access this stuff, it's pretty poor, actually. You type in a search, you find a link, you hope that link's got the information, you back out. So that was our goal, and we've effectively created what I would say is maybe the most advanced intelligent assistant in financial services. It's completely trained on Morgan Stanley's information. You can't ask questions. It's not GPT-4, but it's not ChatGPT, right? It only knows what's inside of Morgan Stanley. And the idea is how can we make every employee as smart as the smartest person on any topic, and that's where we are right now.
How did you get buy-in? I mean, it just feels like so many companies are being. I mean, I heard Gartner even say, "Don't do what you did." And I love Gartner, and I think they have some great thinkers over there. But I was surprised because I'm thinking, this gives you guys, like, this is a start to an amazing advantage, and now everyone's got to play catch up, and in a space that moves faster than anyone can think. That's going to be super hard. You guys are going to keep rolling now. You're on a 2-year head start. And meanwhile, the advice out there is to wait. Does that make you guys go faster or?
100%. I mean, so a couple points. So first of all, we got in with OpenAI, again, before people knew who they were. And we saw something. And, maybe we're smart, maybe we're lucky, we're a little bit of both. But the ability to pick up the phone and call the guy who runs all of research at OpenAI and say, hey, we're having problems with these prompts, what should we do? I mean, if you want to go today and get access to these models, you either do it through Microsoft Azure or you go through a third-party consultant. And guess what? Those third-party consultants learned the technology like 3 weeks ago. It's going to take a long time. And
you're paying them to learn.
Yeah, well, we're not working with them. So we're working directly with
not
OpenAI.
you, the proverbial you. Like
100%.
You get a consultant, and then you're investing in a consultant's internal knowledge and not your own.
That's right.
And so you're still left nowhere ahead internally.
That's right. And we are so. I mean, I got to tell you, like being able to talk to these guys at OpenAI, and they are smart, right? And to be able to get access to them and say we're struggling with this or that, and in all candor, we're developing. In some cases, we're developing. We had access to GPT-4 6 months before it was made available, and we were giving them feedback on how it works. So I think that's one point. And then 3 points. Second point is my boss is the co-president of Morgan Stanley. He's essentially like one of number 2 guys at the entire firm. He wants to make this happen. And you can talk about like how smart the team is and how we run prompt engineering and the infrastructure, but leadership is critical. And then finally, when this whole thing came along, the first phone call I made was to my legal compliance and risk partners. We are regulated and we have to demonstrate, that we're in control and we're being responsible. And, you just can't run ahead of those folks. So they've been, for all the complaints people make about, the regulatory framework, my legal compliance and risk partners, and they get the importance of this. And, we figure out a way forward in which there's no model in place currently for this.
Yeah. And there's 2 ways to look at it. One, is it's challenging. The other is, it's, if you can do it, anyone can do it. Because you have all of the headwinds, right? Just like healthcare, in some ways you go, who should we practice on first? Oh, financial service and health should be last because it's the most important, but, and the hardest. And so the fact that you're able to do it is, I think in my mind, a bit of a miracle, to be honest, from what I experience out there.
No, but the counter I'd make to that is we've been living in this world forever, right? So we're not new to AI. I mean, in 2018, we launched what's called our Next Best Action platform. which was the first machine learning algorithm. Basically it sifts through all the ideas at the firm, and it gives every financial advisor every single day ideas that are relevant to their business, and then they can sort of pick from that. We're under tremendous constraints, but the whole concept of what people want from this technology, they want transparency. And we are very good at developing solutions that have transparency. And I think, I acknowledge the challenges, but I also say that, this is not something that's new to our company or financial services.
That makes sense. I guess if I were to rephrase it a little bit, it would be saying that it's not about the technology anymore. It's now about the ability to leverage it and your people being able to understand and figuring out how to leverage it, growing your folks. And what you're saying is that your folks were already comfortable somewhat in this space, and therefore adopting a more sophisticated technology wasn't a big stretch, and that a lot of other organizations, although may have, less regulation, they also have fewer people that understand it. And that's what takes time, is developing the people, and you having access to even smarter people to make your people smarter is probably the catalyst, right? It's investing in the people, getting started.
Well, that's the first. People are always like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, just do, right? Like I don't, in a world in which there are no experts, you already have people in your organization that are using this stuff on the weekend. I mean, last weekend I took a picture. On the back of a piece of paper, I scribbled a design for a website, Jeff's PC company. I uploaded it to GPT, and I said, using the vision capability, I asked it to generate me a user experience design specification. I then asked it to generate HTML on the top of that. And then I put it into an HTML converter, and voila, there was my website.
Yeah.
6 minutes. And I didn't like the color and the design of it. So I went back in and said, make the website futuristic, kind of like Terminator-ish, and make the mobile welcoming. Boom.
Yeah.
I don't know how to write
Love
HTML.
It.
Don't know how to do it, but it's pretty powerful.
I did a similar thing. I found a camera that will email you based on motion with an attachment of a still frame. I put it on my door, like facing the front of my door, and then I just put a prompt that was, is there a package in this image? And if yes, then I had it text my family to say, hey, there's a package, go grab it. And I didn't need an integration. I didn't need to connect to an API. All I needed was to find a camera that would send an email with an attachment. And I was set. And I was like, wow. And I thought this could be used for, is there a long line at the store? How many cars are in this picture? How many people are in this? Like, is the bank busy? Is the bank not busy? It just opened my mind to like how incredible this could be. And then I started doing things like screen grabbing websites so that I could monitor information without having to parse the website. Like you said, without having to parse through the text, I just did an automated HTML to image to a URL, and then asked the question, like, what's the weather in this website, or this calendar, is 2:00 available? And I just started going, man, the world is just on fire right now with unleashing our creativity. It's really about design now, right? Because that's what you did. You designed something. You didn't care about the dev.
100%. But, the other thing that's really, I think, everyone is and I think this is a really important point that I don't think a lot of people get, is everyone's marveling at like what these large language models can do. And by the way, and we should. But what we're not talking about, I mean, you guys did this for a living, right? When you want to build something, somebody has an idea. We then argue and debate whether it's a good idea. And then we write a user requirements document. And then they write a UX specification. And then they give that design to Then the technical specification is written, and then it goes to the 20 or 30 developers. And then 6 months later, out comes the thing after a bunch of rounds of UAT, QA. Like, the world is going to be completely flipped upside down. I'm going to have some 23-year-old who's really motivated and interested in and knows the space. And she's going to build something in our sandbox. And she's going to say, hey, Jeff, I think this is cool. What do you think? And I'm going to be like, hey, this is really cool. Why don't we build this? And then she's going to hand it to technology. And obviously there's work that has to be done and you got to instantiate it, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, like, that 6 months is going to be cut down massively. I mean, people are saying 30, 40, 50%. It's going to be more than that in terms of time to market. So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think there's I've told this story too many times, but I'll tell it again. In 1970, if you worked on a computer, you were in the computer department, and you were probably a female, interestingly enough. And now, if you operate it's because you operated a computer, you're in the computer department. Now, what is the computer department? Everyone's in the computer department, or no one is. However you want to look at it, we all just operate the computer. And I think we're at that pivotal moment where the development department will no longer exist. We're all to your point, we'll all be developers to some degree or another. Yes, specialization will still exist. There'll still be people who want to build their own gaming computers, or, there will be a small subset of computer specialists, but generally we'll all be developers. The developer department will be laughable, just like the computer department is today.
Yeah, we were just having this conversation with Kathy Pearl, right? About how design and development are starting to kind of overlap. Because in the scenario you described, Jeff, if someone is playing around with ideas in your sandbox, the prototype they show you is already part of the development process. Like the building is happening along with the design, which is totally
it's a
new.
craft.
Yeah. And by the way, it's so iterative. I mean, you think the classic is that the business doesn't know what they want, and the technologist doesn't know what they need. And there's this chasm that exists between these two processes. And the ability to sort of kill that chasm, and they come in and they say, hey, Jeff, what about this? I'm like, I'm literally prompt engineering with my team at their desk. Like, crazy.
It's awesome though. How fun is that, right?
Oh my God. I've been in this job. I'll be 8 years in March, and I've been the chief analytics guy forever, right? I've been doing and even before that I was doing analytics. And I got to be honest, it got a little stale. And then all of a sudden, like, wow, like look at what happened. And then, there's so many problems. I mean, our problem is one of how, where do you focus the time and attention? Because we have hundreds of ideas that people come to us with, and we say, great ideas, and they're all great. Question is, how do you do them? How do you do them in a structured way, and in a way that's appropriate for the legal compliance framework that we live in?
So it sounds like that's taken hold within your organization. It's something we write about in our book, that if you can kind of introduce this internally and show people how it works and get them involved, then it kind of catches fire in that way, where people are excited about it.
Yeah, it is. But like everybody, when we do hackathons, we just did one, like everybody wanted to be in the hackathon. And we're going to do more hackathons. I mean, now that you've got the GPTs concept, right, I write, another thing I do the weekend, right? I write an email to my team every week. I've been doing it since COVID. I took all those, loaded them up, and I built a bot that says, ask Jeff anything. 15 minutes, right? Like, think about all the things, like everyone's focused about jobs and this and that. The other thing, like, this is going to create markets, new products, new way of thinking. And it's, and really, my job isn't even to be the orchestra. Like, I'm just trying to, it's like the king of, Spain that just launches the boats, right? We'll make sure they're good boats and they're well funded. And people, particularly because you don't need to have a PhD in statistical analysis to be really good at this. My best people are under 25 and they have liberal arts degrees.
Yeah. And they're just creative thinkers. I was thinking about that use case. So we loaded the book into an LLM, and this was a while ago. Like, of course we did, right? And just like you said, you put it in front of people and you say, ask it questions, but they kind of stare at you. Well, I don't know what to ask it. I don't know what it knows, right? It's an interesting concept. And so what we did is we just took it a step further, and we had it generate social posts, essentially just posts from the book on a daily basis, using just a technique to make sure that it doesn't cover the same pages over and over again. And so it's just going through the book, boiling down the ideas and just popping it in there. So people weren't going to the system when they had a question. They were going to the system, just like social media, to just browse what the system thought might be interesting that day. And so imagine you took all your emails and then just, had it in the morning or once a week or whatever schedule you'd want, just create an interesting post, and people don't have to think about what to ask. It's we call them conversation starters, but like, wow, what a great world we live in.
Well, the only thing I would say, and the thing that, again, we're not going to fail because of the context window not being big enough, or your ability to access these models, or your ability to load up your information. We're going to fail for two reasons. One is most organizations do not have well curated content.
Yes.
And, part of the reason this stuff hallucinates is because, good luck trying to figure out
garbage in, garbage out. Yeah.
100%. So that's, and by the way, that is a hard problem to solve. I don't think people appreciate how difficult that problem is.
We could talk about this all day. I bring up 2 points that I think a lot of people misunderstand. First of all, the 2 success stories in search are Google and Wikipedia. Most people don't know how much money is spent to get a Wikipedia page up and how much curation happens to make sure that those pages are searchable. There is a lot of money. I think on average is like $350 to $500 just to get somebody to write a Wikipedia page for you and to get it approved. And then you look at every web page has keywords and has experts on search that are boiling this stuff down to make it searchable. Now let's look at a document repository. Nobody took a second to think about how to make it searchable. Nobody spent a dime on searchability. If the internet was filled with documents that nobody cared about search on and didn't spend a dime on, it would be useless right now. It's not the search engine that's made Google or Wikipedia so successful. Wikipedia, it's the volunteers that curate it before it goes up. And with Google, it's the fact that so many experts out there make this stuff searchable. So in order to even match what's out there, which we're trying to better what's out there, most organizations want to do better than what Google can do. They've got to go through every document and spend $300 making it searchable. I just think they missed that.
Yeah. By the way, and that everyone's like, someone's asked me, I was at a conference the other day, like, well, my company doesn't have well curated content. What should I do? I'm like, good luck. I mean, there's no good answer there. The thing though that I would say is, just to give you some reference. So 5 years ago, I inherited the internal content repository, and the feedback internally, we do surveys all the time. What do they like? What do they not? Technology, right? And one of the lowest performing platforms was our intranet site, and it had broken links, and it had stuff that was outdated. And guess what? Because it wasn't matted. You let anyone, anywhere, upload a document for any purpose with no controls on place, like that. That's a challenge. And I'm not saying that's what it was like, but it wasn't as curated as it is today. And today we live in a world in which every single idea gets submitted, every single piece of content, it goes through a set of criteria, and we actually grade the submitter on the quality of their pieces of content. And if they go below a certain level, they get remediation, or they even get removed from the system.
It's the Wikipedia model.
Yeah. Yep. And that's our success. Our success is not the large language models. It's the content.
Yeah, the curation. I do think there's huge opportunity to do curation. I've done some some tests at like just taking a document and saying, hey, either write this as a Wikipedia page or create Google keywords on this document. And I think that's actually produced some pretty interesting results as a shortcut. It's still garbage in, garbage out, but if you're really looking for a shortcut, it is better than just dumping all the text in there.
What you can do on top of that, though, and we're already starting to do this, is you apply, like there are standards, and they are written standards.
Right.
So the prompt is, please apply these standards to a document. We have criteria in terms of how long the synopsis should be. We make sure there are rules around metadata and tagging and, a whole bunch of things. And then you just essentially apply those things and you say, hey, did it go well? Did it not go well? And that's one other point I want to make. It's quality data. It's the technical expertise. But the other is that you cannot successfully train this stuff without human in the loop. I mean, when we launched this platform, 20,000 pieces of feedback. I mean, like when I say 20,000, wow. I mean 20,000, because the truth is, when you flip this on top of your existing model, particularly on something as specific as like a financial services or healthcare, right? You're introducing both internal language and industry language and concepts that GPT-4 doesn't know.
Yeah.
So you have to spend it took us 9 months to train this thing to. It's got to the point where we are very confident in the level of accuracies that we're getting.
Yeah, it's worth it, but it is hard. I also think the other thing people overlook is that knowledge is not static. And so like we implemented a TTL on knowledge, a time to live, so that every so often, depending on the knowledge and the domain, it would resurface it to people to say, is this still relevant? Because you get it all cleaned up and then time erodes it, right? It's a clock of information degrading unless you have, some processes in place to make sure that knowledge is, otherwise you can only put in static knowledge, right? It's knowledge that will remain true for long periods of time.
Well, welcome to financial services, right? Like the idea that was good yesterday. But I mean, there's 2 points in that. One, we do the exact same thing. So you can have stuff that literally has a day life cycle. You actually put in the document the life, the duration.
Yeah, TTL.
It goes from a day to a year, right? And then the other thing that's important is that, and this is where the large language models we actually spend a lot of time on, is in how do you understand when a document that was published 2 days ago is more important than a document that was, and the answer is it depends. Yes. Right? If you want the most recent rating of a company, you want the one from yesterday,
yeah. Right?
But if you want to know the broader implications of supply chain as it reflects to a large tech company, that may be more relevant for something from 3 or 4 months ago.
Right.
And creating prompt to help the system understand that took us some time to figure out how to do, and that's the art. It's the art, isn't it?
Totally. And also who gets to decide that knowledge? Because, all of a sudden the sales department is making the rules for the procurement department, or the finance department. Like you 2 documents, who gets to, even if the sales department's more recent document, you don't want it, like they shouldn't be able to submit knowledge. To your point, it has to be curated because you could even bury in a document information. You could call it a sales document and then put, procurement or finance information in it. And if you don't have those guardrails up to ensure that search is not going to look at, the sales domain, you could end up surfacing information that the wrong person. So it's like, who owns it? Who owns the ability to create the knowledge as truth? Who owns truth on the knowledge? And then on the other side, who gets to see it? Who on the other side is allowed that information? Not all information is consumable by everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole infrastructure around this, both in terms of the assignment of roles and responsibilities. It's also worth mentioning we have a golden set of questions, several hundred that we've been using forever, right? So you're always able to regression test those new, and it's all automated, right? Where you're able to make sure, because here's the challenge you have is sometimes you fix something, right?
Yeah,
And you actually
and you
create
break.
a problem to something else. So you have to be really careful. I also have, we get all the feedback every day. If someone doesn't like the answer, they give us a thumbs down. And my team, 100% of those items, they go chase after. And by the way, sometimes, more often than not, it's not a technical issue. It's just no one wrote about that topic.
Right.
It doesn't exist. So we got to go back to the author and say, hey, people are asking about this. And then finally, I got a whole team. All they do is just try to break it. Like they will go to content and try to figure out, and they know enough to try to trick it, right? To try to ask it in ways that it's going to give you bad answers. So I think you need you kind of like three things to sort of make to make it effective.
Well, this must be a really exciting partnership for OpenAI too, because as powerful as the GPT models are, and as exciting as the things they can do are, like they become a lot more viable to business once they can be reliable and knowledgeable. And so to have a moment where they get to partner with someone that it sounds like you have a really well curated content set that maybe you were working on that perhaps just to improve things internally for your own team, but it had this added benefit of once it met an LLM, was it sort of like a match, like a nice match there?
I agree, and I think there's two reasons they like us. One is I think they did want to work with a highly regulated company, because if you can work with us, you can kind of work with anybody. And then the second point is, we brought in. We don't have expertise in it, to be clear, but we do know the financial services industry, and we do know data and content. And the dirty secret that no one talks about it, we didn't even know we needed it when we built, right? We didn't even know. Like no one told us. And like, oh yeah, you probably need a vector database. You don't need it for everything, but for highly curated, high accuracy stuff, you need a vector database. And in all candor, we kind of co-developed that together. We brought some of our intellectual property and they brought some of theirs, and we did that in a way that I don't think anyone's ever done it. Another example is where, the holy grail on this is a world in which you have us, you have this layer of artificial intelligence, and you've got the world. You've got every API that you connect to, every piece of content, every distribution channel. And you want to be able to wire that person into that infrastructure so that he or she can do anything, right? And then you bring that stuff together, and that advisor was able to manipulate, derive, reason as appropriate. And, part of the thing that we're very focused with OpenAI is how do you build out that API? Because, they can do 2 or 3, but they can't do 300.
Right. So
that's an interesting technical challenge, and that's kind of where we are in the conversations with them now.
Yeah, it sounds like, I interpret this as, if you're not going to do it right, don't do it. But you really ought to do it right. And when people say take this stuff seriously, I think a lot of people out there, a lot of companies can't imagine what that looks like. Like you're defining it right now. Probably for a lot of them will listen and, oh, that's what taking it seriously. That's like a whole nother level. I thought I was just going to hire 7 25-year-olds and do a hackathon and hire, some consultancy and for $300K. And I'll have, I'll have my sort of POC on this. I'll check the box. But you guys, what you're doing is, I don't know, in my opinion, of course, is biased, but it's the right way. It's the successful way.
Well, because if you just want to write poems and generate email, like, fine, right? That's fine. But if you want to build a world in which, we have 300 applications that are available to our financial advisor. I would argue some of them, have not fully experienced. So in a world in which you may not know the name of our risk system, why can't you just say, hey, Josh, Rob, they're on the phone. I want to rerun their portfolios to consider, X, Y, and Z. Now, let me be clear, we're not doing this yet, but conceptually, why do you have to go to a mega menu, hover on something, click on something, have the application come up? I know you guys are UX, but imagine a world where it's almost UX-less, right? In which the experience is all just manipulated
100%.
into one thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Navigation is dead. Traditional UIs will all be replaced. I was going to ask you that question. How long till those applications do you think are mostly replaced by conversational AI? How many years for you guys?
I think it's going to take a lot of time, because, not to get too geeky here, but when you create a world in which you are now offering up a bunch of applications and systems, you essentially are going to have large language models on top of large language models. So the first question is, I've asked the question, which of these applications do I need to go to, right?
Uh-huh.
And, putting aside all the technical challenges, that once you know that it's the right application, then you have to wire it up so it retrieves the right information. You're able to do the function call. And, just doing, 100,000 documents took us 9 months. Now you're talking about wiring it up to every system. Now, I don't know if that's 5 years or 3 years or 20 years. I don't know, but what I'm confident of is that is where this is going.
Yeah.
And the call and the ability to do it with non-technical people, right? Being able to sort of experiment with these things first is, I think, the difference. Because for me to make a bet in the old world, I'd have to spend a lot of money. And I'd say, we're going to spend X dollars and we're going to do this. Now I don't have to make those bets. I can have people play around and come back to me and say, this is the thing that's easier than this thing. We should go here versus there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the more people you can recruit within the company to participate in this, the faster it will go. So the more centralized it is, the slower, the more federated this becomes, the faster it goes. And that goes to your vendors too, right? Like all those 300 systems, they can also come to the table, right? They can meet you. They'll build their own conversational agents that you'll interact with your agent. And that can help it move faster as well.
That's right. Which raises the question. A lot of people, there are providers in this space, and the problem is, they all do like 1% of the problem, right? So do you buy 100 things?
Right.
So then are you now going to 100 apps that do large language models on top of the apps? I think that's really hard, but the truth is most firms don't have the wherewithal. I mean, Morgan Stanley is a large organization. We have a good tech budget. We're able to craft this in a way that I think is really constructive. But I think if you're a small organization, they'll maybe Copilot at Microsoft or something else, but it's not going to be the complete wrapper that it controls everything at the firm.
Yeah, one of the things that OpenAI has shown is something we've been doing for a while, which is this concept of agents. And this is I think is really interesting when you consider it on more of a fractal basis. Not overfitting, like not an agent that looks at 1,000 options, but breaking that down into tiny agents that each look at like 3 to 7 options. And doing like a narrowing agent by agent to go like, okay, what is the task? There are 5 to 7, options. The LLM's going to operate much better than 1,000 options. And seeing that, if these solutions that you guys use create agents, and you're able to sequence them from your side, it starts to go much quicker. I think I agree with you though. When you see it working, it's clear that it's inevitable. This is how we want to interact with machines. And the one thing I do notice, and I would love to hear your opinion on this, is the one thing that's in our way, or one of the things that are in our way, is that the software I'm familiar with is the easiest. Even if the new system is simple to use, it's not as simple as the software I know. And so I find that most people love conversational AI for the software they don't know. And for the software they do know, they're a lot more skeptical because they've already invested in learning in it, and so it is cognitively for them an easier jump to say, I'm just going to do it the way I always do it. I don't know what you see with adoption.
I think that's true. I mean, we still, the biggest challenge with our conversational system is if you type in Google or IRA, it says, what are you talking about? I don't, that's how we lived for 20 years, right? You would just type in George Clooney. Now you have to you would say, I need to close a Roth IRA for a deceased relationship in the state of California. What are the procedures for me to do that? People, I know that sounds very simple, right? But that's not how people are like, well, why can't I just type in Google? And I'm like, well, you could, and it's gonna come back and say, what do you want to know about Google? It's like, well, I want the research report because that's what I used to get. And I'm like, well, you need to tell it what you. Yeah. And again, it's a very different paradigm, and some people get that very quickly. What's interesting is that we've actually done a study of where we're seeing increasing usage, and we looked at the prompts that the users were providing, and it's 100% correlated to the quality of the prompt. So the people that figured out how to get the most out of this thing through detailed prompts are the ones that are now using it more frequently. And I think the truth is this is just going to take a little bit of time, but I actually don't think that it's not going to happen. I think it will happen. It's just a matter of, educating and culture.
Yeah.
You mentioned how important
retraining
leadership is especially in getting started, I would say. Was there, we've talked a lot on this podcast about how maybe to get the top decision makers to kind of take that longer view. You mentioned that your boss is kind of all in on this. What was that like? Is that a matter of just being there in OpenAI's facility and seeing the stuff in action, or because I think there's there's the short-term ROI that's sort of easy to point to, but then the actual process of building things out in a meaningful way is much more fraught and takes a lot more time and kind of a different sort of investment. Is there any insight you can provide into how that light bulb went off for your superior?
I think I don't think it's one thing. I think it's several things. So first of all, I know the history of Morgan Stanley, but back in 2009 we bought Smith Barney, and at the time we did the largest integration in the world in financial services. And as a result of that, we spent a lot of time with senior leadership, educating them on all of the issues and challenges of integration, right? Which are technical, which are data related. So I think that number one, and then by the way, we bought E-Trade, right? And so you have a culture that I think is very nuanced about the issues and challenges that organizations face with technology. Two, when we ripped the Band-Aid off with the Morgan Stanley Smith Barney version system, is we literally moved into the most modern set of technologies available to us at the time. And again, this is 2009, but some of that stuff had been around for 20, 25 years, right? And then I think thirdly, we, in 2018, I mentioned that we launched the first recommendation engine or insights engine for financial services, and that has over 95% adoption, right? They use an email, right? Because why? Who doesn't want a system that's curating all the ideas for you? And by the way, we'll generate the email from you to the client with customized data about their portfolio or whatever, and that's going to essentially learn based on what you and the client do. Who doesn't want that helper, right? So I think that we had some wind behind our backs in terms of being able to actually be successful. And I don't want to speak on behalf of my boss, but I think conceptually he sees, he's a smart guy and he sees what's going on, and he knows that the world of advice in financial services it's going to be different. Now, I don't believe it's going to eliminate the advisor from the equation in any manner, shape, or form. But I think if you're an advisor that's not leveraging these tools, you're going to struggle. right? So I think he saw that, and I think he wants to be in front. And, thankfully we're at Morgan Stanley, which is a great organization that has a lot of expertise. And I think put all that together, here we are.
You said something earlier that I think deserves circling back to, which is I'm looking at it through your boss's perspective here, and there's two questions I have. One, 1,000 point solutions coming at you, with all of them saying it's an easy button, right? Oh, this is easy. Making promises, they're full of shit, right? Bottom line, 1,000 vendors that are full of shit, convincing you that there's an easy button for doing what you guys have done. And then a bunch of execs that want to believe in the easy button. But then which one of these 1,000 easy buttons do you press? And then the second thing is, which is very related to that, is the idea of, business making this decision on point solutions versus IT, and how does that need to change in terms of how we choose software, and where does IT fit versus business in trying to make this decision? Like, if business decides, do they end up with a bunch of point solutions because they're not looking systemically? Like, you guys have done this systemically, and there's a great book on this, by the way, in a podcast we did earlier on point solution change versus systemic change, and that this whole idea that we're going to have a bunch of point solutions that have bolt-on AI is just a passing trend, and that those companies will get a boost for a second, but systemic change, which is what you're working on, is really what's going to take over. But how do you cut through this bullshit of all of these easy button vendors, do something systemic, and who needs to drive it, business or IT or?
Yes, the answer is yes. First of all, I think as painful as our annual budget planning process is, it's critical. So I'll give you an example of what we did this year. We took it from two levels. We asked the question, you're asking new business lines, and everyone's got their own budget, right? And they want to build stuff. I said, and we asked them, could any of these tools be enabled through the use of generative AI? And if so that was one question. And then we asked the question from the outside and said, hey, we know a lot about wealth management. Where could we do things that we're not doing today, that we could do radically different? Because most people don't ask for they ask for incremental change, they don't ask for. So we went through that exercise, and we've identified a whole portfolio. There were some areas where some groups asked for the same thing, like literally the same thing 7 times. And in those cases, we're going to build them in a centralized way, but then essentially democratize them out. And there were some areas that people can effectively run on their own. And I think one of the things that we're thinking about for next year is, how does my team support, we're actually not to support the big project. How do we support the little project? How do we make sure that all of the legal compliance and risk issues are buttoned up? How do we make sure that we're not duplicating anything? And it really, that's really where I see my job. My job is more about coordination and making sure we've got the right people and the right discussions, and then letting those things move forward, in a controlled, monitored way in which everything we do is transparent.
How much do you pay attention to those point solutions? Like, how much do you take time to look at them, or how much do you just...
This is my great challenge, right? Because, do I buy or do I build? And, I don't know the answer yet. We have yet to bring anything in-house. I suspect we will. But then you get into the problem of integration, right? It's not, someone's going to come along with an LLM that does X. But then I'm like, well, I want it to fit into my taxonomy and my structure, and I want it to be a seamless experience. So that is it easier for me to just build it in my own infrastructure? Which, by the way, in many cases it is, because again, it's not hard to build a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Or is someone really built the best X that I need to integrate? To date, we have not bought X. I suspect in the end we probably will, and then we've got an integration problem in our hands.
Got it. And how about IT versus business? How do they work together on this?
I honestly, I think first of all, I'm not even sure where the lines are. If you talk to my technology partner, he is in my face all the time, asking me why we're not doing something the way we should be doing it. And I'm asking him about how we're going to scale the pipes, right? I think, everything I've ever done that's worked out well was because I had a good technology partner who really spent the time for me to understand the business challenges. And when I'm spending the time, understand the technology challenges. And we're finding that that efficient frontier in the curve where we're building stuff that impacts the business, but done in the most efficient way possible. The mistake is, I always say to people, don't give me what I want, right? Give me what I need. And you can save inordinate amounts of dollars if you are clever and engaged. So, everything we do, I do in partnership with my tech team. They are part of every conversation. And sometimes in a world in which you can do lots of cool things, maybe the fifth thing on my list is really hard and complex from a technology perspective. I'm just going to go to 6 because I got plenty of opportunities, and it's not like that's the one thing I got to solve.
Sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong, but fundamentally, one of the fundamental building blocks here is that business and IT have a trusting, great relationship. And if there's a land grab scenario there, or a trust issue, or a confidence issue, it's going to be really challenging to pull off what you guys have pulled off.
Listen, I'm certainly not smarter than most people, but I have been here for over 10 years. And, the head of UX, she's a great partner of mine. The head of technology is a great partner. And listen, by the way, we don't always agree, right? I'm not
right.
suggesting
No.
we're all like, it's like big kumbaya.
I want to.
But you're communicating around a shared vision.
But the thing is, I remember my old boss used to say, don't be right, do right. And, nobody cares whether it was my idea or their idea. And the truth is, it's all our idea. And again, I hate to go back to the original point, but what this technology only allows more of that, right? It's going to unleash more collaboration, more iteration, which is only going to result in better outcomes. Full stop.
Yeah, and it seems like the barriers between departments not only need to dissolve in order for some of this work to come to life, but also this work has the benefit of bringing departments closer together in a sense, because you do have this shared vision for a future of your company with technology that requires everyone's input and contributions in a way.
Well, we're all going to be prompt engineers too. Like even the most senior people of the organization are going to be prompt engineers. So if you're doing prompt engineering on a system, are you a technologist or are you a business person? I don't know, and I don't really care.
Do you guys have, or do you have on your radar this a concept of having a team that's just an enablement team? In other words, going around the org almost on a roadshow basis, going to each department and trying to help them ideate and educate on how this technology could be used and leveraged?
Yeah, that is my team. My team is part evangelist, part coach, part arbiter, and part partner technologies. And, right now it's more my team building, right? And prompt engineering. And if we talk in 2 years, my team will be doing 2% of the work, right? And that, the better we are
100%.
is the more distributed it is. The less they need me, the better
100%. It's like the programmers become consultants and enablers versus the doers, because the programming is a skill, whether you're coding or not. Programming and logical thinking and understanding systems, and to be able to leverage that across your org better by them not being the doers. And it's fun. I think they'll enjoy it.
It's so much fun. My team, I would, honestly, you should have them on the call, on the presentation. They are every day, and I'm not just saying this with hyperbole, I am so amazed by the stuff my team does. They come, hey, Jeff, come over and look at this. And I'm like, what? You just did that? And I don't know, like when I was 23, my job was not so great, right? I sat doing pivot tables, right? Probably for 8 hours a day and didn't understand the pyramid is being inverted, right? Being a senior guy with 30 years experience and deep technical expertise, yeah, I mean, it matters, don't get me wrong, but being 23, being articulate, a great problem solver that can collaborate with other people, like, give me 100 of them, and the impact is unbelievable.
Yeah. I saw a study once that showed that the perfect combination is people over, like, I think it was like 50 or 48 and people under 25. that as a team, because I think a lot of people, at least for me, thought, when you're in your 30s or 40s, you're at the peak and those are the best performers. But this study showed that actually, no, you're too busy with kids and life and being tired, and that it's this combination of wisdom and naivete and energy that create these like amazing outcomes. So,
well, that's the thing,
for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think there's some. I mean, not to denigrate all my middle managers, but who actually are quite capable and effective. But the naivete, like, I have two boys, 16 and 18 years old. Like, they do not think of technology as something else. It is just part of them. It's like you don't think of your left arm as something. It is just part of you. And they just, like, you don't even explain to them how to do something, and they just figure it out. And that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. We went all over the place. I think this was I really enjoyed this conversation. Hope you did. All right,
well, you guys, if you're ever in New York, look me up. I will buy you cocktails, and we will talk about the future of technology anytime you are.
Let's do it.
That sounds awesome.
Awesome. Guys, it was great meeting you. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks again for tuning in to Invisible Machines. Don't forget to follow Invisible Machines wherever you get your podcasts so that you can hear new episodes as soon as they drop. You can also watch this podcast on the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. Thank you so much to everyone who listens to this podcast, and especially to those of you who leave comments, because we've received a lot of really useful commentary that has helped us shape this podcast as we move forward with it. Thank you, as always, to our producers, Elias Parker, Kate Timchenko, and our video editor, Michael Litvinov, for making this podcast look and sound wonderful. We look forward to catching up with you again next week, right here on Invisible Machines.